Hi, MOMally. It's Andrea Scannell here. It is 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and I'm here to talk to you all about toddler sleep. I thought it was so interesting that I put a general question about sleep out there, and of the 60-something comments, 59 and a half of them were about toddlers. So that's where we're at right now. There were also some newborn and little baby questions, and we will get to those in other moments. So pour yourself a cup of tea. I'm kind of just figuring this whole system out. So I've got your questions here. I'm gonna have the Facebook Live open, I think, if that works, on my computer so I can talk to you and see your questions, because I don't know if I can keep up with them on there. I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out as I go. So welcome. This is super fun and exciting. And there I am on the computer too. So, all right. Here we go. There were a bunch of questions from a whole group of moms who came to my groups a couple of years ago, whose kids are all now 3. And it was, I don't know, I guess you guys said it publicly, so I'll just say your names. Amy and, Amy McCoy, you were the one who started the whole thing. So you guys were talking about your 3-year-olds who used to be amazing sleepers, and now should you cap the nap? They're having trouble going to sleep at bedtime. There's bedtime shenanigans happening all over the place with toddlers. And it seems that the entire group of you have the exact same thing happening. So that's the first thing I want to address is bedtime. Hi, Amy. I'm talking to you and your whole cohort there. And I feel like as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about tonight, I was thinking, you guys know all this. Nothing that I'm going to say is going to be revolutionary. It's not earth-shattering information. It's all stuff that you probably know and have read and may be practicing or maybe not, or maybe you had all of these things in place and then slowly they deteriorate over time. So the big news is most toddlers are going to bed too late. Oh no, Laura, you're having trouble getting it going. Can everybody else see me? Can you guys just, hi Kim, throw in some yeses, just say, yeah, I can hear you, because apparently Laura can't hear me. Can someone else who's on just give me a little yes? I think there might be a little delay. So I'm just gonna keep talking. Oh good, hi Dana, thank you. All right, so I hope you figured that out, Laura. If not, this will be in the feed. Thanks, Portia. Okay. So most toddlers are going to bed a little bit too late, especially if your toddler has just given up a nap. If you have a 3-year-old who's napping, sometimes not napping other times, you can't make them nap if they're not napping. You can't make them sleep later in the morning. The only time you can make up for lost sleep is at bedtime. So thanks Amy, if your regular bedtime for your kid is 7 o'clock and all of a sudden they've dropped a nap, it's not unreasonable to be putting your toddler to bed at 6:30. And I realize that the first thing a million of you are going to think is, oh wait, are you talking to me? No, you're talking to someone else. So you guys are figuring that whole thing out. The first thing you're going to say is, I don't get home from work until 6 o'clock or until 6:30 or until 7. And that's a real problem. That's a real dilemma for a lot of working parents. So I'm saying this with the understanding that we all do the best we can and that sometimes working parents just can't get their kids to bed as early as might be necessary. But do the best you can and go for as early as possible. 7 o'clock really is ideal. The reason for that, those of you who came to my groups have heard me say this a million times, so forgive the repetition, but the reason for that is because toddlers have, babies and kids have an elevated level of melatonin in their body in the early evening. So kids are really, really, really primed for sleep between 5:30, 6 o'clock, and 7 p.m. You might notice your toddler at dinner time is sitting at the table and kind of falling asleep and having trouble eating. But then somehow at 7:30, they're jumping on the bed, bouncing off the walls, and you can't get them to slow down, and they're doing a million things. The reason for that is because they have those elevated melatonin levels that get them nice and sleepy and ready for bed, and we need those elevated melatonin levels to fall asleep. And then what happens is, as the melatonin levels start to go down, and they're feeling sleepy, their brains, all of our brains are adaptive and say, uh-oh, you're really sleepy, but you're not in bed yet, so I'm going to kick in some adrenaline and some cortisol to keep you going, which is great, and it's adaptive and really smart of our brains to do that, and it helps for you when you're staying up late and you're getting stuff done. But it's not so helpful for kids, because as their cortisol and adrenaline levels are going up and melatonin levels are going down, it's becoming harder and harder for them to get to sleep. So as you get further from that optimal bedtime, it's harder for them to fall asleep. It's like drinking espresso and trying to take a nap. So early bedtime is really, really, really important. Early bedtime is particularly important if you have an already overtired child. So when kids are sleep deprived for whatever reason, if you've gone on vacation, or if they've been sick, or if they just aren't getting enough sleep overall, or they're waking up super early, you have a kid with a sleep debt, you gotta put them to bed early. It's really the only way you can start to catch them back up. Once they're well rested, you can move bedtime later and play with it a little. But 7 o'clock is the sweet spot. It's also really lovely to have an evening, to put your kid to bed at 7 and not parent in the evening and have time to talk to your spouse or get work done or do your own thing. So the first big thing is early bedtime. The second big thing, and I know you all know this, and I know that you've heard it a million times, but the second big thing is routine. Toddlers especially, and babies too, and frankly all of us, need routine to set us up for sleep. We need to know the exact order of events that help our systems kind of calm down and get relaxed and quiet and go to sleep. For some kids, that might be 2 books and a song. For some kids, that might be some meditation. If your toddler's old enough to participate, ask them. They can participate and talk to you about how they want to end their day and what helps them get quiet. You can talk to them about having a quiet mind and a quiet body and a quiet voice. And if they're in any kind of school or daycare, they know exactly what all of that means. It's really helpful to do some deep breathing exercises with them. Somebody on the Facebook group, actually, and I don't remember who it was at this moment, said that they tell their kid, or they took a class where they told their kid to smell the flowers and blow out the candle, because deep breaths for little kids it's a hard concept, but I loved that. So you can practice that by smell the flower and blow out the candle, and it helps them kind of get quiet. Mindfulness practices that you might do for yourself are really wonderful for little kids too, in helping them get quiet and slow down. The other thing about the bedtime routine is that whatever you're doing is whatever's right for your family. You want to do it the same way every single night. So you want to read the same number of books, maybe even the exact same books. With littler kids, that's really helpful. Hi, Laura, you made it. You can watch the beginning later. So you want to keep the routine really regular, really boring. Dance parties are awesome. Dance parties aren't good before bed. Running around and tickling and having fun and all of that, not good before bed, which again, I know is really, really hard for working parents, because you haven't been with your kid all day and you want to have that super fun time and you want to enjoy each other's company. But try to shift that kind of fun, frantic enjoyment to the morning or to the weekends or at other times you have together, so that the last hour before bed is very calm. Hi, Rachel. It's great to see you too. Why aren't you at the show? I'm so confused. Anyway, see, the comments derail me a little. I got to figure out how to turn that off and then go back and check them later. I was saying the routine, the routine has to be, oh, I'm sorry, you're sick. Super, super calm, predictable, and regular. It's really easy for that bedtime routine to get off track. It's super easy for your toddler to say one night, oh, I have to go to the bathroom again. I'm thirsty. What was the funny comment in the group where someone said, like, my eyelids hurt, or I don't know. I mean, the excuses that kids come up with. Oh, swipe right on the comments for silent mode. Audra, thanks. Thanks. That's so much easier. So toddlers will come up, well, older toddlers especially, will come up with 100 million excuses for extending bedtime. And you need not to do that. Toddlers need boundaries, and this is another thing I know you know, but it bears repeating and repeating and repeating, so I'm going to repeat it. They need boundaries. They need to know exactly what the routine is, down to this is the number of books we read, this is the number of songs we sing, this is the number of hugs I'm going to give you, this is the number of kisses, this is the number of sips of water, or here's your water right near your bed so you can take it whenever you need, and then we're done. I really strongly suggest writing that down, because having it written down and on a chart on the wall takes it makes you not the bad guy. So that when the toddler says, no, come on, just one more song, one more book, one more, you don't have to say, no, it's not me. It's the chart on the wall. Like, sorry, the chart says only 2 books. Oh, well, we're done now. I say this knowing how challenging all of this is. I had a challenging 3-year-old a couple years ago. So I really, really, really know that toddlers can be super challenging. You need to be stronger willed than they are. So another thing that came up in that conversation was kids getting out of bed. And this also came up with Jessie on the Facebook group I think it was the local group, where she was talking about her son just popping out of bed and popping out of bed and popping out of bed. And even with the early bedtime, it might be 9:30 or 10 o'clock by the time they get him to bed. That's really common once they have freedom and they're out of the crib, which, by the way, should be as late as possible. Keep your toddlers in the crib as long as possible until they're like, I'd really like to be in a bed now, Mom, because all my friends in 6th grade are in beds. No, not 6th grade, but really, really as long as possible. I'm a big fan of 3 and a half, 4-year-olds in cribs. If you can do it and they're not complaining about it, do that. But if you've already done the switch, it's also possible to go back to the crib, which I think Kayla was the one who was like, uh-oh, bed's not working, back in the crib. So imagine, though, that's not possible for whatever reason. Maybe the younger baby is in the crib, or you don't have the crib anymore. If the kid is popping out of the bed, the thing you need to do is called the silent return. And it's really, really hard to do, but it's kind of the only trick in the book, beyond locking the door, which we don't want to do. We don't want to have kids screaming on the other side of a door. So you are going to silently, with completely neutral energy, take them by the hand, and you say only one phrase. I like to have people say, it's time to sleep. Your energy is everything in this process with the silent return. You can't be angry, which is really hard, because it's super hard to go, it's time to sleep, and have like clenched jaw. You need to be super calm, super easy breezy, super like, that's what we're doing now. This is sleep. It's time to sleep. Take them by the hand, put them back in the room. They're going to pop right back up, and they're going to follow you back out. And you just have to say, it's time to sleep. Take them by the hand and come back. The idea behind the silent return is you're taking all reward out of the equation. You're not rewarding the behavior positively. You're not saying, okay, one more hug, or go back to sleep. Even being scolded is a reward. It gives them a little hit of hormones that engage them. And toddlers are like little scientists, and they want to know, do you really mean it? Is that a real boundary? I don't think bedtime's a real boundary, because last night we read an extra book. So I bet tonight we can read 2 extra books. Toddlers, and I know you all know this too, as soon as you give them an inch, they're like, wonder if I can get 2 inches. Maybe 3. And they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So you have to be really, really reflective and look at where you have not been consistent with your boundaries. And we need to think about sleep. I say this all the time with my clients, with my one-on-one clients, and in my infant and younger baby sleep class. You need to put sleep in the same category as other issues of health and safety. You need to think, if my toddler were screaming in their car seat on the highway and like screaming bloody murder and just did not want to be in that car seat, you wouldn't take them out of their car seat and put them on your lap while you're driving. You wouldn't be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're crying and upset about this boundary, so no problem, you're going to sit on my lap while we drive. None of us are going to do that. So if you can think of sleep and boundaries around sleep as the same non-negotiable, ironclad, this is just what it is, like this is how we're doing it now, you have to have so much patience with a kid who's bouncing in and out of bed, because you need to return them as many times as it takes. I have a colleague who had parents returning a kid for 3 hours and then again later in the night for several hours. But eventually they will stay in their crib because they will give up on the idea that you don't really mean it. If you have set boundaries a million times and not stuck with them, it's going to take longer because your kid really knows all the buttons. They know how to be creative, they know how to be coy, they know how to be charming and funny and upset and angry, and they'll push every single button and try every single trick they got. And you need to be totally neutral and totally in control and totally authoritative in the process. And again, I really, really know how hard that is, but I really, really know that this works if you do it. So, let me see. So, Laura, you just said he's out of his crib now. So, yeah, if your babies are out of the crib, if putting them back in a crib is at all an option, please definitely do that if that's possible. They take all the inches. Yep, give them an inch. They take all the inches you have. So, I just want to see, give me a second to read some comments and see if there are any, okay, this says 44 comments and I'm not seeing them all. I want to see if I can address things in real time. So let me see how I can do that. Maybe I can swipe and, oh, there we go. Sorry guys, I'm new at this. Courtney, you asked, you started new daycare this week and it starts an hour later. Still best to put her to bed at 7 at 22 months? Yep, definitely. Absolutely. 7 o'clock or even earlier. Later than 7 bedtime, I rarely see kids who do well with a bedtime later than 7 p.m. Jennifer Moore, how to set the boundary of being quiet in the crib. Yeah, we've talked a lot about this one. That's a tricky one. I think with some kids, if they're a little bit older, reward systems can be helpful. Being quiet in the crib, you don't have a whole lot of control over. That might be with some kids if they have been rewarded by you coming in with, if they're not quiet, then it could be that that's reinforcing the negative behavior. It could be that you can play with bedtime. You and I have had a lot of conversations about this. I'm so sorry that she's still doing that. Is she still talking until like 9:30? Sorry. Jennifer, I'll see if you answer me. So Kim, you said Felix naps some days and other days he doesn't. Should we drop the nap and push up bedtime? We're dealing with middle of the night, wakes up and early rising. That was the other thing that came up a lot, was early rising. Early rising is almost always a result of overtiredness. So middle of the night wake-ups will definitely cause early rising. Overtiredness causes middle of the night wake-ups. Early bedtime is the first line of defense with night wakings and early rising. And because with all sleep things, you have to look at the data that your kid is providing for you. So if the data is saying, okay, he's waking up in the middle of the night, he's getting up early in the morning, both of those things are indicative of a sleep debt. So again, the only time you can make up for the loss of sleep is at bedtime. You don't want to go, if your kid's currently going to bed at 7:45, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you don't want to suddenly say, okay, you're going to bed at 7 now. With a little baby, you might do that, but with a 2 or 3 or 4 year old, you're going to have to inch it earlier gradually. Having a really calming bedtime routine, making sure that they're falling asleep independently at bedtime without all sorts of bells and whistles. You do the routine, you say goodnight, you leave the room. If you have to then do the silent return until they're asleep, that's what you do. But once they get the message that sleep is sleep, then you just have to let that be the rules. Setting up rules around sleep is also really important. Saying like, you get in your bed, you sleep all night, you get up when it's morning. Those are the rules around sleep. You can write them down. You can read books about it. There are a million sleep books. I can throw some in the comments when I'm done. But that's, so Kim, I hope, I'm trying to go back up and see what your question was. I think that, yeah, so if he's napping sometimes and not napping other days, I'd say if more often than not he's not napping, you probably want to just lose the nap and move bedtime up. I think the night wakings and early wakings might stop. Um, so, and Jennifer Moore, you said yes, she's still talking late at night. I'm wondering if you were able to do, Jennifer and I talked about having her daughter do some mindfulness practices and doing some like yoga and meditation, and obviously not necessarily calling it that with a 3-year-old, but doing a lot of like self-soothing and calming stuff to get her brain calmed down, because she's talking to herself for like an hour after she gets into the crib. So I'm wondering if you've had any success with that. Bedtime, Amy, at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is a really good bedtime for most kids, even when they're napping, but that's a case-by-case thing. I would sooner drop the nap than lose the 7 o'clock bedtime, but sometimes you have to be a little bit creative and flexible. If the nap is, everyone is always really reluctant to let go of the nap, and I really understand that, but if the nap is making it impossible for them to fall asleep at bedtime and capping the nap isn't working, but on days when there's no nap, he falls asleep easily and sleeps all night, that's probably a sign that he's ready to give up the nap. And then you could do a nap like just on the weekends, or maybe, every once in a while. Yeah, Valen is suffering from FOMO. Yep. FOMO's a tough one when kids are just like, no, but you guys are out there. I want to be with you. That's really tricky. You need to find ways to make the morning feel really special, and you need not to reward behavior when they're staying awake. You need your evening to be very calm and quiet. No screens after like 6 o'clock, and everyone is doing calm, quiet things. You're not like, dad's not playing video games or watching TV. Mom isn't on her phone because that's, or, looking at a screen in any way. Everyone is maybe reading or doing calm, quiet things, or doing dishes, setting the tone that everything is getting calm and quiet and getting ready for bed, which helps with the FOMO thing, because if it's nothing fun going on, it's less fun to stay up for that. Kara asked what time the nap should be for a 7 p.m. bedtime and how long should it be. That really, really, really depends. There are some kids who need 11 hours of sleep at night. Some need 12. It depends on what time they're waking up in the morning. It depends on their age. If they're a younger toddler, they could still be doing a 3-hour nap and sleeping 12 or 13 hours at night. That would be the higher end. And then some kids are napping for like an hour and a half or 2 hours and doing 11 hours at night. That would be sort of the lower end. Kim was wondering if daytime sleep could be interfering with nighttime sleep. Sorry, I'm not seeing your whole message. Yeah, daytime could be interfering with nighttime sleep, but you have a lot of factors going on. Kim asked if the daytime sleep is interfering with nighttime sleep. He's still napping for 2 or more hours. You don't let it go more than 90 minutes. That could be interfering with the nights. You'd have to kind of do a little trial and error to see. But before I did that, I would move bedtime earlier if it has inched later. Yeah. So your 2-year-old, Libby, is taking an hour to an hour and a half to fall asleep at nap time. Happy to go down and playing till they fall asleep. Libby, I'm curious, when did your kid turn 2? I don't think you said girl or boy. So when did he or she turn 2? If it's a new 2-year-old, there's a very, very, very common phase where 2-year-olds refuse naps. It's weirdly very consistent at like 22, 23 months when all of a sudden they're like, no, I'm not napping anymore. And a lot of parents make the mistake of saying like, okay, I guess we're done with the nap. They're not done with the nap. Hold on to the nap for dear life. You need the nap. They need the nap. You just answered, I think you said 23 months. Look at that. So this is a weird period of nap refusal, and chances are if you're just super consistent and if it's super stressful for her, calling it nap time, if she's crying, you could just say, you don't have to sleep, but everyone's taking a rest. Give her some books, give her stuffed animals, have her spend an hour and a half, I would say, in the crib, and your nap will come back. It really is a very strange, almost universal thing. Sarah, who just had another baby, congratulations. Is it a concern to have a 1-year-old that sleeps 10 hours total nap and nighttime? That's a really good question. No, not necessarily. You, every family is different, every kid is different. So you have to determine for yourself if your kid seems well rested. A well rested child has an even temperament, especially in the late afternoon. Like if your kid is melting at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and like you just can't keep them held together to get them to bedtime, that's probably an overtired kid. If your kid falls asleep every time you get in the car or they get in a stroller, that's probably an overtired kid. If your kid is waking up at night, waking super early in the morning, those are signs of sleep deprivation. If you have to wake them in the morning, that's not okay. We need babies to be sleeping enough so that they wake naturally feeling rested. So if your baby is sleeping well for only 10 hours and seems to like be holding it together all day and isn't having behavior problems, you might be fine with 10 hours. That would be the very, very, very low end of sleep, but there are those kids out there. So there's really nothing, like all things with parenting, there's nothing universal. You have to just look at your child and see where they are. Libby, you're welcome. So let me see. I'm sorry that I'm missing some of these. I'm going to get to as many as I can. I'm only going to stay on for like another 5 or 10 minutes, but I'll come back and talk more. So let's see. 1-year-old, let's see, who is this? Jessica said, 1-year-old won't fall asleep at night, and you're usually falling asleep before him, afraid to let him scream and wake up his brother. Oh man, the 2 kids in 1 room thing is so complicated, and a whole bunch of people asked about that on the on that thread in the Facebook group as well. That's really tricky. I will say that when you have 2 kids in the same room, and this is a very, very broad general statement, we usually have them figuring sleep out together, because you want everyone sleeping in the place where they're going to sleep. And if another person in the room is making noise, they've got to learn how to manage that and how to sleep through it. So it's likely that your older one's going to wake the younger one, and they're going to have to learn, oh wait, is the brother older? Hold on. Oh, if you have a 1-year-old, we're talking about an older brother. Older kids often sleep through younger babies crying. It's amazing what they can sleep through. If you can get everyone's bedtime together, then everyone goes to bed, they figure it out, and fall asleep when they fall asleep. And if they wake each other up, they kind of have to just figure it out. I mean, that's obviously a very broad stroke kind of general answer, but very tricky. That's something we should do a whole other thing on, just getting 2 kids into 1 room. I have a whole bunch of clients working on that right now, and it's all going really well for them. Emily, you're 18-month-old and night wakings. Do you ignore the crying? That's a really big question. So how to manage night wakings beyond what I've already talked about, which is address bedtime, like make sure you are maximizing sleep in every possible way. Once you've done that, if you still have night wakings, then you might be looking at doing some sleep training, and that's a bigger question. I know you came to my baby sleep class, and basically all of the sleep stuff that we talked about there still applies with 18-month-olds. You might let them cry. You might go in and help. That's really a very particular kind of case-by-case thing. You asked about ignoring crying during teething and colds. When you suspect that your child is in any kind of physical discomfort, you're always going to go to them. That having been said, kids can sleep when they're teething. You will give them Motrin if you need to. If your pediatrician is cool with that, you will address it appropriately and then expect that they're still able to fall asleep on their own, because they are. You just don't want to go back to your worst habits. Kids get sick. So let's say your kid has a cold and you tend to them at night, because that's what you do. You help them, you give them medication, you soothe them, help them calm down. Ideally, then you're still putting them in the crib and saying, okay, I love you, go to sleep now. And because they've done that a lot, because they do it at bedtime and they do it for naps, they know how to do that. And they will not have the expectation that you're going to nurse to sleep or rock to sleep or soothe all the way to sleep. So having healthy sleep boundaries when they're well and healthy pays off when they're sick. Would the boundary suggestion, let's see, Mary Ellen, you said, would the boundary suggestion apply for a 3, almost 4-year-old who goes to bed with no problem but comes into your bed in the middle of the night? yeah, that would be a case where you'd be doing a silent return, which is super painful, especially if you have a kid who's just climbing into bed, because at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's much easier to just be like, oh, here you are in my bed and I want to go back to sleep. But if you want to change the behavior, you're going to have to apply some behavior modification, which in that case, I would start with the silent return. So, oh, you're welcome, Emily. Hi, Alexandra. This is so fun to see you guys all on here. Let's see. I'm going to take one more question. Miriam asked, how do we reinforce naps? My 9-month-old doesn't sleep during the day outside of the stroller. That's kind of my wheelhouse. This is sort of not about toddlers, but honestly, it's all the big message. One of the big messages I want all of you guys and all of my clients to have is that you are in charge of the sleep thing. You can take control and manage it in the way that's right for your family. Sleep training is right for some people and not right for some people. Some parents are really happy to hold their kids while they sleep or snuggle a kid to bed every single night. But if what you're currently doing with sleep isn't working for you, you can change it. So if right now you are going for long walks with your 9-month-old every single day, that's going to be tricky on a day like tomorrow when it's like below 0 here in New York. So it's probably a good idea to start establishing some other ways of falling asleep. If your goal is independent sleep and having your baby sleep for several naps a day by themselves in a crib and going to bed at night in their crib and sleeping all night, there are ways to do that. That's where we talk about sleep training. We talk about all sorts of different methods. And when I say sleep training, I'm talking about any area where you're helping less and doing less than you're currently doing. So or less than you were doing yesterday. If right now with your baby you are nursing or rocking or feeding or walking or patting or shushing or singing or snuggling or I don't know, the list goes on, doing all of those things to get them to sleep, I would consider it sleep training to say, okay, I'm going to do one fewer thing and see how that works. Maybe the baby doesn't need all of those things. Maybe tomorrow I can not rock. Maybe I'll just hold them and see if we can get them to sleep that way. And if you are really aware and thinking about what you're doing and trusting that there's nothing wrong with your baby and that your baby's capable of sleeping, if you get out of the way, you can slowly decrease the intervention and encourage independence. So that's a really big question to say, like, how do we reinforce naps? Because it's the whole thing. It's having your baby know that they can fall asleep independently and you knowing it too. You knowing it is the most important thing. You need to know that your baby can sleep before your baby can sleep. If you approach sleep from a point of view of like apologizing to them, which I did with my first, it was a whole like, I'm so sorry I'm asking you to sleep. I know it's so hard. And like, that was never going to work. That was like a disaster. You have to approach it with a very confident matter of fact. Yeah, we're sleeping now. This is how sleep is going to go. You got it. I know you can do it. They don't know they can do it, but you know they can do it. Sorry, I feel like I kind of got off track a little bit. Nicole said the best advice I ever gave is it working for you? Yeah, and I really mean that. I mean, like, if you are co-sleeping and have your toddler in your bed all night and it's working for you and you like that snuggle, that's awesome. And you're rested and your baby's rested, that's great. There's like no reason to stop doing that. That never would have worked for me in a million years. I can't sleep with a kid in my bed. I can't do it. My back hurts and I'm just not ever in a deep sleep. So that was never going to work for me. I also needed my evening. I don't want a parent after 7 p.m. So I needed everyone to be sleeping on their own in another room from like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. If that's a thing that you want to have, you can probably have that. Maybe not till 7 a.m. Those of you who were talking about early wakings, there are babies who are early risers, just like there are adults who are early risers. If you have a kid who it seems perfectly well rested, is going to bed at a reasonable time, sleeps all night, naps well, isn't falling asleep at inappropriate times in the car or the stroller, and has an even temperament all day but gets up at 5:30, then you just have to survive until they can get up at 5:30 and get themselves a bowl of cereal and hang out until you get out of bed. That's when you're just going to work towards independence in the morning, because sometimes that's just what you get. But that's not usually what you get. Most kids can make it to 6 or 6:30. Your days of sleeping later than that are over for a little while. So what else? Oh, I said I was going to stop a few minutes ago, but now I want to keep going. Let's see. What other questions do we have? Eleni, you said your daughter wakes up an hour or two after being put in the crib and won't fall asleep again at 19 months old. So I would, if we were working together one-on-one, I'd have a lot of questions about that. I'd want to know what's happening at bedtime. We would look at all of the factors that go along with healthy sleep. We'd look at the environment, we'd look at the schedule, we would look at the routines, we would look at how you're putting them to sleep. And so that's a question I can't really answer without more details. But generally speaking, if your kid is waking up at a very consistent time and you're going to them and doing something, you're reinforcing the negative behavior. So you have to figure out if you want to keep doing that. Sometimes we let kids cry, and I know that's very controversial, and there could be people watching who really aren't comfortable with that, in which case you probably won't do that. But there are times when there's just a persistent wake up, and you just have to give them the message, like, not coming, you got to figure that out. Or you do checks or some version of sleep training. Let's see. Oh, this is so fun. I know so many of you. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Blue. Oh, my God. And so many moms who used to be in the neighborhood and aren't here anymore. So, yeah, Jessica, you said that's why you need to figure it out. I just lost your comment. Falling asleep in your bed and then moving him. That's super common. This is another thing that people often, when they ask questions on the Facebook group about sleep, are like, oh, I'm doing this thing where, like, I sleep in the kids' bed and my partner is on the couch, and, like, everybody's all over the place and none of us are sleeping, and there's, like, this shame around it. You're doing your best. You're surviving. So do your best, survive, take the path of least resistance, and then when you're ready to do something differently, you will. But everyone's doing all of that stuff. Somebody in my group this morning sort of confessed that she was bringing the baby into bed, and everyone in the room was like, yeah, of course you are. We're all doing that. Like, you're not alone. If you feel like, oh my God, my kid's the worst sleeper in the world and we have all of these terrible habits, I promise you, your kid is not the worst sleeper and your habits are no worse than anybody else's. But the news here is that you can change it. You just have to have a plan in place. You need to take really good care of yourself so that you're able to do that. And then you do what you need to do to make some changes. Anna asked, is there an age where Ferber doesn't work, like 16 months? That, not necessarily, but it really, really, really depends on the kid. As kids get older, in one respect, sleep training gets more difficult because they can reason with you and talk to you and call for you, and that's really complicated. But in another respect, as they get even older, it's easier because you can talk to them and you can really have a dialogue about what's going on. So you guys, I will do my best tomorrow, definitely not tonight, because we are housebound tomorrow in the sub-zero weather here during Daniel's nap. I'll do my best to come on and see if I can answer some more questions. But definitely keep this conversation going in the Facebook group. You guys know a lot and you help each other out all the time, and I will try to chime in whenever possible. If you are interested in working with me one-on-one, I do one-off half an hour or hour-long phone calls or Skype consultations where we can, like, be face-to-face and talk about sleep issues. And then I do full sleep consult packages. And what that looks like is you would fill out an intake form. We would have an hour to an hour and a half long consult. I would write you up a whole plan based on what we talked about, and then you take that and run with it, and I would keep in touch with you. We'd talk every single day while you implement the plan. And most of the time, kids are sleeping really well when that whole process is done. So at the moment, if you want to see what I do, go to dreamalittledream sleepconsulting.com. You can also, because that's kind of a pain in the ass website to type in, really bad idea. You can go to MOMally.com, and there's a link there that will take you to the sleep site. And eventually, it's all going to be on the sleep site. I mean, all going to be on MOMally. So, Amy, I'm so glad you asked that question. You were the one who inspired the toddler sleep talk. And I'm so glad you guys all tuned in. Please, please, please invite your friends to join MOMally Parenting. I want to do more and more of these. We have a bunch of really fun Facebook Lives planned, and I want to tune in and talk more about sleep because it's kind of my thing. So have a good night, you guys. Good night, Stephanie. Bye, guys. Oh, man, Stephanie, I miss you. She just left Astoria. So many people who just left Astoria tuning in. And people from all over the place. I loved that someone commented and asked me to put Eastern Standard Time because people are in different time zones. Because of course you are, because it's not just here in Astoria anymore. I love you all, and I don't know how to turn this off. Oh, because there's a thing blocking the finish button. Good night, guys. I'll talk to you all soon.